And I would also like to give a special welcome to the Future Academy that has prepared especially for this session. Welcome to you. My name is Gert Balling, and I'm chairman of the Danish Science Cafes, and I'm going to be the moderator of this session. And today's Science Cafe is going to be on material and virtual worlds. And why is that? Well, it's because a lot of young people actually test their identities in the virtual worlds. And at the same time, you can see that educational institutions build up learning environments in Second Life. So there's a lot of interest in the field. And you come to think of that, well, actually, many of us here in this room don't only visit the virtual worlds, we have parallel lives in the virtual worlds. So you come to think of, well, how does this change our mode of perception and also the way that we perceive the real world? What happens in this overlap between the material and the virtual world? Maybe it will open for new opportunities and maybe also for some potential dangers. I'm sure that today we're going to hear a lot of myth busting, right? We're also going to hear about what is true. We are going to hear something about wish thinking and maybe also some really scary bedtime stories. We're going to hear about what's the research in the field. We're going to hear what is it good for. And we'll also have some real experience from the super gamer perspective. Maybe we'll even learn about what they do research in other countries and also in other fields of research that can be used on this topic. That's what on the program, and that's why it's very comforting to have a super expert panel up here. So I'd like to introduce here on my far left, Toril Elvira Mortensen, Associate Professor, Department for Culture, Aesthetics, Organizations and Society from the IT University of Copenhagen.
Oh, applause.
Great. And in the middle, you have Bo Kampmann Walter, Associate Professor and new Media Consultant, Center for Media Studies, Institute for Cultural Sciences from University of Denmark. And here, just next to me, we have Jonas Ersson Barming Hansen, architect, MMA, and a super gamer. Here, welcome to you. And in a minute, I will give the floor to you. But just before we start, I'll just use 2 minutes to tell you about the Science Cafe, because it's something very different. And what is a Science Cafe? Well, it's a dialogue about a subject seen from different angles. It always has to do with science, of course, but always science in a societal context. Apart from that, the ingredients here will be ideas, views, and also associations that just pop up as we move along. And the Science Cafe here, it's a funny hybrid, you could say. It's not a show, but it's not a boring lecture either. It's a cafe atmosphere around a scientific content. The format is relaxed, it's quite laid back. Just look at the panel. We will do here 1 hour straight. There will be no breaks, so feel free to drink a little soda, eat some peanuts, chewing gum, whatever, but do not inhale anything that's noisy, okay? Great. But as you know, nothing is for free, and the Science Cafe here is based on the interaction between the experts and the audience. So we need you to be a very active audience. Please raise questions and comment on their answers up here, and also feel free to come with alternative answers. That could be great. So to a large extent, it's you that will decide what we are going to discuss here. That's a great opportunity. It could also sound a bit anarchistic. That's why I will be the moderator. And you could say it's a great job I have because I have the authority to end any discussion. I like that. And the rules are extremely simple. If you want to say something, raise your arm and I will come to you with the microphone. And there's only one more rule that's important, and that is we would like a constructive and a sober debate, so please be polite. Okay, let's start with a short round of presentation and tutorial. You will have the first 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you very much. As I said, I'm Toril Mortensen, and I work at IT University of Copenhagen. And I've been studying online communities and what we now often call virtual worlds since the early 90s. I've started out studying MUDs. I don't know how many of you actually know what a MUD is. Do you know what a MUD is? Okay, there's some people who do know what that is. For the rest, it's a text-based game where you have to write and read everything. There are no images in it. And these are the precursor of the games that we see today, that we understand today as virtual worlds, as persistent world-type games. But let's look a little bit at the two basic words which are used for this cafe, the words virtual and material. What does virtual, for instance, mean? If you Google it, you find that virtual means that it's very close to being what actually is. It's not really what it pretends to be, but it comes very, very close. It's virtually there. It's virtually real. Or we can say that it exists on, or it occurs on the internet, which is very interesting definition because it's a totally new definition. It comes with the understanding of the computer and the internet, so it cannot have existed longer than the internet has. And that is how it tends to be used. Rather than understanding it as unreal, we understand it as something which occurs mediated through technology. Personally, I think the idea that this is a world is an exaggeration. Because in my opinion, virtual worlds are not worlds, they're games. And that is the important part of them. They do have a certain worldness. There's this term, worldness, that is understood to create a space in which we can interact. We can interact in it and we can interact with the space, and this space exists online through technology. And so it has come to be understood as something that is comparable to, almost, but not really, the material world. And to understand that, we have to question this idea of materiality. What is materiality? What is the material? And if you try to look for a definition of material and materiality, it just puts you into a circle definition. It says materiality is that which is material. Because defining what is physical, what we can touch, is very hard. Because the best way of knowing that it's there is by actually touching it. So the material world in that way becomes the world we can interact with through our bodies by being in it. And so we experience this material world very, very directly. It's very immediate to us, and we think it surrounds us all the time, and we hardly ever think about it. But the thing is, we can't understand it and interpret it without creating a system. We learn the rules of the material world. We learn that if we drop something, it falls down. And so sooner or later, we create this complex system that we understand, that we interpret, and we interpret the patterns in it. And it's how we understand the world. And through this ability to understand patterns and to interact and imagine and create meaning through patterns is how we can say that something which is not physical can have worldness, that we can understand it as a world. Because it becomes a set of patterns, it becomes a very complex interaction where all these different objects play together in different ways. And a game is a system. A game is a system of complex rules that play together. This rule affects that rule, which affects that rule. And we agree to follow them. We agree that we submit to these rules at this point. And so we can get the game to play. It can start playing. Without this agreement, without these rules and the connection between them, there is no play. And but I will end now, after we've said that online, these worlds, they are games, by claiming that the ability to handle and communicate this complexity is what makes the computer special and why the computer can create something which cannot be created in any other way. And I'll also claim that this, what it claims, it creates, the games are the most original art form of the modern area of the time we are working in. Games, to me, are a culture expression and they are art. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's good just to have an explanation of what is the virtual, what is material, and sometimes it's difficult to look at the difference between the two. I remember once I was at a ferry, and two kids were looking out of the window, and the waves were quite high and splashing water over there. And they looked at the window and they laughed and looked at each other and said, "Look, man, it's 3D." So great, thank you. I'll give the word on to Bo, please. The next 5 minutes is yours.
Yes. Yeah, okay, I have to do something about this. This is materiality, I guess. Doing this with your microphone, and the wind is coming and all that, and we can feel perhaps an urge for lunch or whatever. I want to approach the things a little bit differently. I want you to imagine that we have invented some sort of time machine. So all of us aboard this time machine, and we go 50 years from now into the future. Now, things will become rather bleak in 50 years. Some mad president has evaporated the whole earth. And the only things that are still there is the Air Force One aircraft and some, random fan posters of Justin Bieber. That's just about it. But we are secured. We're inside this large time machine, and there are no noise as there is right now. This is also materiality. And the thing we learn, and this is my point, this is about discussing why do we actually have this gap between the material world and the virtual world. But because what we witness inside this time machine is that there are some people from a far planet, many galaxies away, called Uponor 2. This is actually a non-existent planet, something that I made up. But they are here on planet Earth 50 years from now, and they are doing anthropological studies. They are investigating what the fuck was wrong with human nature. Why did we behave like we behaved? You have to understand, and this is actually the discussion seen from an extreme point of view, the people from Uponor 2 don't have emotions. So when they come across the song by Beatles, Yesterday, they don't know what the fuck to believe. Because the song line says, "Yesterday, all my troubles seems to pass away." So if today hadn't occurred, I would have been happy if yesterday would have remained yesterday. Then I wouldn't have the sorrow that I encountered today. And they can sort of understand the lines, but they don't know what to do about it because they don't have this kind of emotional relation to what we are and what we dream of becoming. They don't have this preference and gap on Uponor 2, 50 years from now, between the material world and some made-up world, some dreamt world. They don't have imagination, meaning they don't have empathy. They don't have mirror neurons in their head. They can't relate to other people. They can't feel sorrow, and they can't feel joy. But what they do have, the people on Uponor 2, and this is essential, they have some kind of conceptual empathy. They can't understand our emotions. They can't understand our fascination of dreaming, of being in virtual worlds, of making movies where we can pretend to be someone else. They cannot understand that, but they can understand it on a conceptual level. They can understand our concepts. And this is actually quite true. So imagine that we have this kind of anthropological report from the people from Uponor 2 trying to investigate what the fuck we're doing and start from there. And from there we can sort of ask the question, why do we have this polarization? Why is there this material on the one hand and the virtual on the other hand? The things that we can do, which is tangible, like busting into the table, and the other thing, dreaming of identities, being in a world where we can sort of live out our fantasies and so on. And one thing that I think is striking and also represents a generational gap between, well, us and you, some of you at least, is my phone in the pocket. This is a virtual instrument. It keeps me connected to the world. I have it on me. It's tangible. I can hear it buzzing. It's soundless, but it buzzes in my pocket. This is the virtual world. Isn't that material? I mean, actually, I think, and that'll be the extreme question, I think the whole idea of materiality versus virtuality is somehow stupid, looked at from you guys' perspective, because you live with it. I have a teenage daughter, and when I enter her room, she's sort of playing with 2 or 3 other 16, 17-year-old girls, and they talk to the phone, they don't look at each other, but still they're there. They're in this world, and yet they're not in this world. So this whole idea of 2 separate worlds, I think from a certain point of perspective, from the anthropological perspective of Upjohn 2, and from you guys' perspective, is actually stupid. So the whole foundation of this is crap.
Thank you, Bo. So why is it so important to make a difference between the material and the virtual world? And especially when you come from your generation, it wouldn't really make sense. But let's hear now, we will give the word on to Jonas, our super gamer. Please, Jonas.
Yeah, hello. Hello, is this my voice? Is this my voice? This is my voice, okay. Hi, my name is Jonas. I'm an architect who works with theater, and I play a lot of computer games. Today I find the subject of virtual worlds fascinating because I live in them, and I am an immersionist, which is a nice way of saying role player. And to me, the fascination of being in a virtual world is when the virtual world becomes real to me. Like you just said, a virtual world can be real because you have it in your pocket. To me, a virtual world is real when I am emotionally invested in it. And sometimes, to be honest, I am more emotionally invested in my virtual worlds than I am in the real world. It's true. Also, I am other people in the virtual world. Sometimes I am a girl, not always by choice. And sometimes I'm a unicorn. And the only separation from the real world that I feel between those two, the virtual and the real, is actually the stigma of being a person who is sometimes a unicorn. In the virtual world, it's quite okay. In the real world, people are a little bit weirded out, like some of you look right now. Yes. And yes. And also, one of today's subjects is learning in the virtual world, which is something that I have done for a long time. And yes, we were talking about how a lot of, I don't think you must have been subjected to it as some kind of genius class or something, I think. When someone says, young people like computer games, let's make them learn by playing computer games. I want to stipulate that young people are already in the computer games and learning from them. And we don't really need university people and teachers coming here and telling us, and this is funny, I'm saying us because I'm 30, and you're not. Yes. They're telling us how we need to, is this me going out? They're telling us how to use these virtual worlds when we are already using them, and we're actually quite better at it than they will ever be. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bo. Thanks a lot, Bo. So, and here we just had the ideas of how you can change the identity in these virtual worlds, and also you could say a statement on learning in the virtual worlds, because many of you are actually using these virtual worlds, already learn a lot from those. So why should teachers, universities, whoever, should take over these worlds and make it to a learning environment and tell you what to learn in these worlds? The word is now free. Does anyone have a comment or a question for one of those in the panel? Wait, we got one over here.
Do any of you think there's a problem with young people having an increased part of their identity in virtual worlds? for example, Facebook or World of Warcraft or something like that.
Okay. Can it be problematic for young people to spend too much time in these virtual worlds?
If we start with the premise that there's no difference between material worlds and virtual worlds, then there's actually not a problem. The problem is if you just sit on your ass too many hours, at which point your health would degenerate, which we can all agree is a problem. There are certain issues. I've been doing research on people's activity in online games for many years, and some of the issues is basically that you tend to lose some connection to people that are close to you. But at the same time, all of these ways to communicate are basically ways for human beings to connect. So in a lot of cases, these virtual worlds lets you connect to people that you would otherwise not have met, that might be exactly the people that can help you develop. So it's not easy to say yes or no. One example of the first large group I met and interviewed of gamers, there was one of the gamers there. He had come from Germany to Holland in order to be part of this guild meeting we were at. And he said, he claimed that he had gained 10 levels of social activity just by going to this guild meeting. And he managed to connect to people who understood how he thought and understood the things he did. And he went out of his comfort zone and traveled quite a long distance in order to meet a group he spent a lot of time with. I find that a very positive thing. It made him challenge himself and it made him grow. At the same time, all those hours spent in front of the computer probably looked like they were very lonely hours. And it made him lose some of the contact with the people immediately close to him, which might be a bad thing. So I actually don't think there is a clear answer to that. I think it is something we have to learn to live with and something we have to learn to deal with.
So you mean actually it could support the social competences of a person?
Absolutely. I have another very interesting example of a woman who lost her feeling in her legs. She was sitting in a wheelchair, and she wrote me a very long email after I'd been in a television show, and she told how World of Warcraft had given her back the ability to dream that she could dance. She had at one point stopped to dream that she had forgotten what it was like to move in her dreams. But by playing World of Warcraft, she could both connect with her children who were running around and had moved away from home, and she started to dream again that she could dance. I found that to be very touching and very clear that this gave her back some of her lost identity by playing.
Great. And remember, if you have a question, comment on what is talked about, raise your hand.
Okay, then I'll raise my hand because maybe, yes, now it's working, yeah. Do I have to do like this? Yeah. This would actually go against what I just said, that maybe there's not this large gap between our actual world and the virtual world. But then again, to try and test what actually goes on in the social media, Facebook for instance, try to imagine, all of you, that we would do the same things out in the open. Me, for instance, I would carry a sign saying, "I've just got a new kitten. Look at me, I've just got a new kitten." Then I would approach you with the glasses and say, "Would you like to be my friend?" And then I would dare you to like or unlike or erase me. That would be the end of me. And I would approach you, for instance, and say, "Okay, since we're friends now, would you like to see my holiday pictures from last summer?" Right? It seems quite absurd, and you're doing like this. But this is normal practice on Facebook. Like, so try to imagine that this would be played out in the open, right? And I think the other part of your question was about not really about virtual worlds as such, but rather about our prejudices, and also, you know, the newspapers and the media's tendency to polarize things. Either it's deeply fascinating and it's really good stuff, and wow, we can learn a great deal from Second Life and World of Warcraft, and there are lots of good stories, and there really are, and people meet this way. And on the other hand, there's this kind of idea of escapism, and this idea of when you play or are existent in virtual worlds too long, you somehow disconnect with the actual world. And this is not something new. This is part of what has been known as media panic for hundreds of years. 200 years ago, there was a thing called romanticism, and a lot of people would accuse writers and thinkers and stoned people whatsoever of paying too much attention to their dreams and their literary works rather than the actual life, getting a wife and a job and so on. So this is actually something old, and my idea is that these people from Uponor too would discover this. They would discover this basic thing that we humans do. We tend to live in two worlds. Yeah. It's not something new.
So what about you? Do you also often hear the comments about getting lost in these virtual worlds from grown-ups? Yeah.
I don't usually get lost in these two worlds, but the thing you said about you having to go out with your photo albums and ask people to like you about those, a lot of comics on the internet have been made about that, and I've seen a lot of it. So, and people tend to make fun of it, but one comment on this said that if people did this, if there were no Facebook, if there were no Twitter, like anything, no social media, you would have to do this. Like, it's a second reality for people to think about these things, to think about, whoa, I have to go outside now. This is crazy. And my grandma does these things, weirdly enough. She goes out with her photo album sometimes. I don't know if she meets friends or something, but she just shows them the pictures. Then she walks to the next person or the next house. And I can relate to that thing you said. But then again, if there were no social media, how would people know about ESO, for an example? Like, you need the social media to get things out, and some people use it for the fun. Facebook with the pictures, fun pictures they just show there, and also gaming worlds where you have your second life, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jonas?
Yeah. So, is this working? No. I'll take this one. So. Now none of them are working. Now both of them are working, I think. Okay. So I think there is a difference in the value. Do I look really stupid right now? I think I do. There's a difference in value that we tend to allocate to certain activities, and there is. I talked about stigma before. A lot of people don't think that my social relations on the internet are of equal value to my social relations in real life. And this is still something that we are, as a species, I guess, the Yukon of two people would say, that we are struggling with the fact that we can actually validate our actions in the virtual world as much as we can in the real world. And of course, everything done to excess is bad for you. Like Toril said, if you let your body deteriorate in front of the computer, that's bad for you. But the value you allocate to what you do on the internet, what's important. At least to me. And I am very shamelessly open about the fact that I am better friends with some of my virtual friends that I have never met than I am with some of my real life friends, which sometimes make people really offended. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, but imagine if someone told you, someone that you were considered to be good friends with, told you, yes, we are good friends, we're good friends, but I know this person from the internet and I think we have a better connection. And so then examine that feeling and see how you feel. Would you feel offended? And speaking of World of Warcraft, I would still say I am better friends with a lot of my people from my World of Warcraft guild than I am with people I've met in real life.
No, just pass it on to Tori and to Bo, because here we're now talking about this interaction actually going on in the virtual worlds. How does this way of interaction affect the way we are together with people that's standing right in front of us?
I think
And just raise your hand
difficult to
if you have a question.
It is working. Yeah. Those anthropologists that I spoke about a minute before, one of the things that they learned 50 years from now is that it's one thing to speak about realism, what can actually occur in our world, and on the other hand, consistency. And I want you to raise your hand. How many of you have seen the television series Game of Thrones? A lot of you. And as you know from the books and also from the HBO television series, there are dragons in Game of Thrones. The Targaryens have dragons. And that's quite exotic. But you know perfectly well that these dragons aren't realistic. But that doesn't mean they aren't consistent. They are there for a purpose. They don't exist in our world, meaning they are not realistic. We don't have dragons. We can't produce dragons. But we can dream of dragons. And once we dream of dragons, we have a purpose of invoking dragons. The dragons was the vehicle that made the Targaryen power in ancient times. And now they want that power again. Hence, dragons enter the stage. And that's something we do all the time. When we play games, when we enter virtual worlds, when we go into Facebook, when we establish connections, maybe we can dream of something that sort of gives us an edge because it's not really realistic. I can be a king, you could be a queen, and so on. We can't be that in real life. But still, when we are a king and when we are a queen, we do it for a purpose. We have this consistency. Things are made up and they fit together. The thing about Facebook, that's what you were asking. Maybe we ought to do that more in real life. That's more a question about volume. This means that I would go off this stage and I would go into the inner city and I would scream in the top of my lungs, "I've got a new kitten!" Wouldn't that be absurd? And if you witnessed that, and I would go repeatedly off to you and say, I want you to be my friend. Knock, knock, be my friend, be my friend. And if I would go this with my head, you would say, okay, he's mentally ill. Call somebody, call help, right? And still we can do that. So it's one thing to speak about volume, what we do in different areas. And another thing to speak about, is this correct in this world that we are inhabiting? Dragons are correct according to the story of Game of Thrones. And yet, there are no dragons in this world, right?
And thank you. And we have Toril next. I'll just say we have one speaker with a comment question here. And remember, if you have a question, comment, raise your hand. I'll come to you. One speaker here, but Toril first, please.
I just want to quickly address your Facebook the story here, because that's not really how you behave on Facebook. Do you? Are you one of those stalkers that keep asking everybody to be your friend?
If I were, I wouldn't admit it, right?
Oh, really? You can't do that because
no.
you don't run around asking your friends to like your.
I wasn't talking
pictures.
about me. I was talking about the prototypical Facebooker.
No,
right?
It's that the prototypical Facebooker. I've been on Facebook since almost since it started. Before that, I was on Friendster and on MySpace and on Orkut and on a lot of places that none of you have ever heard about. Because there were researchers looking at it that kept inviting me, and it's not how you behave. We are learning to behave. We are learning. We are increasing our understanding of how to be social in these spaces. We at one point perhaps everybody were behaving like idiots, and I actually have some really interesting Facebook friends that I have never met, but who approached me in that early age when we did knock on each other's doors and yell, "Will you be my friend?" But nobody does that anymore. Today, when there is some kind of connection. We invite each other to friend each other on Facebook. Like, okay, I like what you do. Would you like to be my friend on Facebook? And we behave with it through it with a lot more delicacy than what this indicates, which shows that these virtual worlds are being assimilated in the material world, in the world where we already have an etiquette, we have an idea about how to behave, and this is mingling, and we are learning to use this technology. It may move slowly. It may take a couple of generations before it's totally natural, because new changes are like that. We had to learn how to answer the telephone. We had to learn how to get in and out of cars, and where it was decent, where it was a good idea to park them, and where it was not a good idea to park them. We have to learn how to interact with technology, and we are learning. We are developing our understanding of both the social media and of the games and what games are and how it's suitable to behave in them. Thank you.
Now, Toril, you've been on the social media for many years, and can you then see what is the development in the behavior? How was it in the beginning? Was it stumbling or?
Oh, it was very, very stumbling. Remember when America opened up internet for just everybody through AOL, and on the discussion lists, this was in the mid '90s, early '90s. In discussion lists, people would say like the internet is ruined now. Everybody can be on it. It's like every jerk out there could just come in and have an opinion. Of course, and that's basically how it's been since. Everybody has said, oh, it's ruined now because everybody is on it whenever something new happens. But at the same time, people really, really learn how to use it. We are learning how to use the different media. We are learning what the dangers are. We are learning what the threats are. And we are becoming more skilled at gauging these threats and understanding the level of interaction we can have. We are learning the limitations and we are learning the potential, definitely.
Great. Thanks. We have a question or a comment here, please.
Can you be addicted to those virtual games? And if yes, can you compare it to other addiction types, like to alcohol, to medicine, to whatever?
Yeah, and Jonas, please. Can you be addicted to these virtual worlds so it's difficult to act in the real world?
Yes, and I know many people who have had, addiction is one of the words that have lost a bit of value recently, because we kind of refer to it lovingly, oh, I'm addicted to Coca-Cola, oh, I'm addicted to Game of Thrones, but addiction is actually something dangerous for you, and as I said, you can lose yourself, or you can do something in excess to a degree where it's bad for you. And yes, I've known people who needed to go into therapy because they stopped caring about basic bodily functions and hygiene. So yes, you can be addicted to virtual worlds to a degree where it's not healthy. And until we figure out how you can go to the toilet in the virtual world, I guess that will always be a distinction between the two.
And thank you, Jonas. What do you say about the addiction to these virtual worlds?
I would also have to say that one of the things that those scientists 50 years from now on discovered from we human beings is that you can also be addicted to the idea of addiction. We also have a kind of media addiction system, meaning that we always do this kind of us versus them mindset thing, and it's going on all the time. So we speak about addiction, and yes, there can be people that are addicted, but we always tend to speak about the ones that are addicted and the ones that are completely not addicted. And the funny thing that most people, I mean 99.9% are in the midst of those extremes. They are doing what you're talking about, entering a new media technology and slowly learning the codes, conducts of behaviors, and so on. Once we had the telephone, we learned how to listen to the radio. We could separate what was going on inside the television screen and the things that were going on inside the living room, and so on and so forth. And we'll keep on doing that. And that's what we're doing most of the time. A more or less perfect balance between virtual stuff, potential stuff, and actual stuff, like, catching the train back home to University of Denmark, as you said. It's called University of Southern Denmark, but thanks again. So we do that all the time. Those are the extremes, but those are the extremes that keep popping up in our minds, and those are also the extremes, like, Taiwanesian youngsters who gets entrapped in their rooms and don't leave them for 4 days, and they get dehydrated, and their mother finds them, in one corner of their room, dead, of course. Those are the stories that we hear about. So it's also part of our stories. It's also part of the headlines of the newspapers. And as I said, this has been part of our story, part of our fascination, and also part of our fear about these things for decades, for hundreds of years. But still, I would say, according to the Facebook analogy, and you raised that point, what would happen if we do that in real life? I would still say that if I go to the train, which will transport me back to Odense, and if I do Facebook stuff, that would mean that I would capture the speaker system, and everybody on the train would more or less voluntarily hear, I just had, and I would sort of shout it, I just had a very interesting debate between, and stuff was going on and so on. They haven't asked to hear about that. They just, it's just there. But I guess we've learned how to cope with that noise in the meantime.
And thank you, Born. We'll get to Toril in a second. Just remember, for the next comment or next answer, raise your hand and I'll come to you in a minute. Toril, you had an extra comment here.
What we're talking about here, what we often call what is interpreted as addiction is excessive gaming. And yes, excessive gaming is a term, and we'll discuss this. And excessive gaming is something that becomes a problem for about 1 to 2% of the gamers. So there is a lot of research on this. There is a lot of energy having gone into it. What it also shows is that most of the people who have a problem with their excessive gaming are people who have other issues that they need to deal with, other issues that leads to these excesses. And Mark Griffiths, he's a researcher who studies gaming addiction, and he also studies other addictions, but he particularly looks at gaming addiction. He says you can be addicted to anything. It doesn't matter. You can be addicted to whatever. You can be addicted to gardening. I've seen people tragically addicted to gardening. They just garden all the time and just don't look after themselves. People do that. And you can become that addicted to music. You can become that addicted to cooking. People eat themselves to death because they're so addicted to food. And so it doesn't really matter what becomes your focus. And yes, gaming can be that kind of focus, and we need to be aware of it, and we need to be aware of the signs of addiction that gaming can express. But I happen to believe that it's not necessarily the technology that creates this situation, because the research indicates that it's not the technology that creates the addiction, but it is the tendency towards addiction in the individual. And for some of those individuals, gaming can really, really trigger it.
So thank you very much. Now we heard the two researchers talk about addiction to gaming. And maybe it's most obvious to ask the super gamer about addiction to gaming. So what do you see it as, a potential danger, or is it a problem at all?
Well, we can talk about these Taiwanese people who game for 4 days straight and then die, of course. That's extreme cases. I find it more interesting to look at, for example, people like me, who I might be addicted. Right now, I'm actually thinking a lot about the storyline I'm playing through in Heroes of Might and Magic 6 that I left to go here. And but I'd like to talk a lot about values. How much value do we give to certain things in our lives? And the normal thing to do is to value real life more and virtual life or gaming or whatever less. And then, of course, when you meet someone who is more like this or this, you tend to think that's not normal. And when you meet someone who has a value system that's skewed compared to your own, I think that's when the word addiction comes into your head. You say, oh, that guy is addicted because he does not have the same value system that I have, which is basically the assumption you make when you call someone addicted. Again, as I said, addiction is a word that has been thinned out a bit because we use it about everything. As I said, addicted to TV series, addicted to other stuff. And I think only people who have actually been addicted can understand what addiction is like. I would like to introduce the word invested, which is a nice middle way. I am invested in my games.
Okay, wonderful. So the idea is that addiction, well, maybe the term is wrong, and maybe, I think you all three speak about more tolerance in understanding the investment of time and engagement in these kind of games. Now I'd like to go to you, the audience. So, do you believe in what they say? Is it true? Or do you have another way of understanding this engagement in the virtual worlds? How many of you actually have parallel lives in the virtual world? How many of you have an avatar? Coming up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we'll go to the myth. We'll just have to go to Bo in a minute, but I think actually we will just give you a question here. What is your favorite myth on doing virtual worlds? All people have ideas about if it's good, if it's bad, what it's useful for, how can you use what you learn in virtual worlds in the real world, etc. Come up with a myth, yeah?
You always hear people say that you learn absolutely nothing from gaming online and with friends. Well, I learned English in about 2nd grade, where I found an internet game that only spoke English. So I had to guess what everything were, and from there I learned English from gaming rather than school. So that's a busted myth from my side.
Okay, the myth is you learn nothing, but here's an actual experience of learning English doing gaming. What is the research on this? What does research say about people having competences just playing their way through virtual worlds?
This would of course be every teacher's wet dream, that we can somehow transport the things that we're good at by, for instance, gaming, even at a very young age, and then do stuff with it in a learning context. There is a concept, maybe it's not really a scientific concept, but there's a concept within the gaming community called hard fun. You're really, really having fun. And what you're doing is producing a number of kilowatts, and you're actually working in the strict scientific sense of the word. Why the fuck are you spending 5 hours of your precious time doing something that from a rational point of perspective would be absolutely stupid, but you cannot be convinced to make your homework? You won't do the dishes, and you would absolutely not lawn the, backyard or whatever. Can you somehow transport what we're doing with this hard fun into something else? That's what we're looking for right now. But what I think is more essential, I think really all of us, the scientific community, the gamer community, and the next generation, which is you, I think we have to lift the bar of normality. In the science, we speak of a point of reference. We measure everything according to some referential point. We cannot understand what it is to be sick if we don't have a concept of what it is to be well, right? We cannot understand cancer if we don't have an idea of what it is not to having cancer. And the same thing about normality and addiction. We speak about it as if we have addiction at one point and bizarre old-time life where we exist in this world, and then now and again we enter a virtual world. That's really not the case. The normal point of perspective, the referential point of normality these days would be complete and constant oscillation between the actual world and the virtual world. Something we do all the time. So I think basically our point of reference is wrong.
Great, and then it will be Toril and Jonas, and maybe you could also draw in the perspective on, a couple of weeks ago there was a story that Minecraft now was taken into 6th grade, I think, in the actual education of the children. A lot of people, a lot of young folks using Minecraft on their own. What happens when you take these kind of popular games into the educational system?
I'll do that. I'll just before I start answering, there was another hand up a moment ago. A girl a little bit further back there. One of the important things about learning in games is that you have to be very conscious about what you can actually teach and what can you not teach. There are certain things that you can make people use games to learn fairly. Simple skills. You can use it as experiments to test things, or you can use it as a place to train cooperative skills through social media and through games. But the things that you really want, the investment, the engagement, where you want people to spend 5 hours on doing something, that's intrinsic learning. It's an intrinsic desire to learn. You have it within you and you want to explore this field. And the school wants us to be intrinsic learners, but mostly we are extrinsic learners because we learn because we have to do these grades, we have to submit this homework, and so we don't engage in the same way, and that cannot be forced. It can be encouraged to a certain extent, and sometimes for some people games can encourage it, but it cannot be forced.
Thank you, Tori. And Jonas for a short comment, and then we have the last question down here. Please, Jonas.
Yeah, I play Minecraft, and I gain a very valuable skill from doing that, which is my spatial recognition ability is a lot better because of playing that game. And it comes from something as simple as being able to judge using my eyes what is 6 blocks away and what is 5 blocks away. And that is a very valuable skill. It doesn't sound very valuable, but it is when you work in 3D. And as Toril said, as soon as someone gives me a task or a lesson to learn in Minecraft, I'm out. It's not fun anymore, and I'm not learning.
Great. We have a comment or question down here.
Yeah, it's not actually a question, but I want to say about the things you learn online and in video games. In World of Warcraft, I've met people, and I've learned what it's like to be, I don't know, an Englishman with 3 children playing World of Warcraft at 11 p.m. And I've met a lot of people of all ages with all kinds of relations to other people, and it's just interesting to learn socially by sitting by yourself in your living room or bedroom or whatever. And also on sites like Tumblr, for example, I've learned a lot about gender roles, gender identity and sexuality and all that, and I've met people. You know, we tend to surround ourselves with people who are like us. And by doing that, we don't meet anyone who's really sort of what we would call unique or special. But by going online, we can meet people with other struggles and other things to think about. And that's just, suddenly it's like your mind is opened and the world is bigger. And I don't think I'd ever had that kind of, consciousness about the world if I wasn't online in any way.
So it can help you to widen your horizon, and it can actually also help you to get in contact with people you would never speak to if you met them on the street or a discotheque, etc. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, this is almost the wet dream of every technology lover. To be able to say that yes, technology opens us up to more experiences. It makes us perhaps not more learned, but smarter, wiser, more accepting. Anybody who read a comment field and seen what the trolls say know that it's not necessarily like that. But at the same time, yes, it does give some of us the opportunity to get something more out of the time when we were otherwise not able to connect, when we were not able to see beyond ourselves. There's this, there's a very funny little comic strip by a Norwegian comic drawer. She draws a character called Nemi. Do you know her? Well, some of you might. I think you really should check it out. And Nemi is asked by a girl, a little girl she's together with, what were you doing before the internet? Were you bored? Oh, Nemi says, yes, we were bored. Well, the little girl says, I'm bored sometimes too. And Nemi answers, little girl, you were never bored at that level. So basically, the internet makes sure, the telephone, the computer, whatever, make sure you are never bored at that level of boredom.
Thank you very much. And Jonas, for a remark before the last question from me.
So the first time my World of Warcraft guilds lit up, which is always very, very painful. It's separated into the role players and the immersionists and the hardcore raiders, the gamers. And you ended up with the people that you had that thing in common with. So, and this is specifically to you, instead of saying, oh, I meet people that I have nothing in common with that I suddenly empathize with, I think it's more like this virtual world allows you to find something you have in common with people you never thought you would have something in common with. And it might be a very academic difference, but I think it's very important. And it's very nice to know that you have something in common with a 40-year-old man who has 3 kids and lives in the UK. And I wish you all the best. And yes, that was it.
Wonderful, thank you. And now we'll go to the last question. And now we've been talking a lot about wet dreams here. And we also end on one. And the wet dream would be, let's say I had 10 million euros that I would like to give to a research project. Then I'll ask Toril and then Bo, what would they use these 10 millions for if they're going to do a research project in this field? And then in the end, I will ask Jonas what they should use the money for if they should do some research that was really interesting in the perspective of a super gamer. So Toril, short answer, what would you use 10 million euros for in a research project?
I would do exactly what I'm trying to plan right now, a big research project on understanding the role of playfulness in social media. The fact that we enjoy to do this, that we enjoy to play around with the technology, and that we enjoy to learn and we enjoy to meet others. And sometimes we like to be really, really nasty as well. So we play what we call dark play, and we like to be trolls and we like to be evil, not just good. It's not only unicorns and pink flowers out there.
Okay, great. Yeah. And Bo, what would you use the 10 million euros for? Short answer?
Yeah, I would produce a super game, not from a learning perspective, which I think is often the case nowadays, but from a gamer's perspective.
Great, thank you. And Jonas, what should they use 10 million euros for if it should be meaningful?
You know what? I have a hard time figuring out what a research project should be. I have been involved in some of Toril's research projects, which is interesting, and I would say she should take these projects, especially the ones about dark play, about connecting with your inner evil person, because there is fun in there, and he or she is usually very, very, very nice to get to know. And I would say take those research projects and make them available to more people, get more people involved, also people who are not by nature gamers.
So make the research available to a broader audience. I think that was a very good ending. I think we should give a last chance to Toril, Bo and Jonas. And thank you to you from the Future Academy here for asking very good questions. Hope to see some of you tomorrow where we go into city planning and architecture. Thanks. Bye.